Hey folks, well today Paradox finally announced Europa Universalis 5 and this is going to be my early impressions of the game. So if you're not aware, I got to fly out to the Tinto studio. I will say straight away, they did pay for that. They paid for my flights, paid for my hotel, and some meals and things like that. But they're not sponsoring this specific video. I guess if you think that affects what my feedback's going to be today, do keep that in mind. I always want to be upfront with that kind of thing. And also, this is a very early access version of the game. This isn't even like a beta version. This is early access. Everything you see, everything I talk about is subject to change. In the background, you're going to see footage of me playing as Scotland. I'm going to release a follow-up video in a couple of days showing literally the first 30 minutes of the game with no editing, just showing you it so you can see if I pick this game up today, say it was released today, it obviously isn't. How would the first 30 minutes of this game play without any kind of, spicy meme footage and all that kind of stuff? So do keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions about what you see in the background or what I talk about, do leave a comment down below with your questions. I'm free to talk about everything that I saw in the game. So do leave your questions. And then either Saturday or Sunday, I'll probably release a follow-up Q&A video where I'll take your questions and answer them in the video, and we could talk about it a little bit more there. But this is going to be my first impressions. There is a limit on how long this video can be, so I'm not going to go super in-depth into everything. If you don't know much about this game, I have been covering it since its unofficial announcement over a year ago. There's been a bunch of what they call Tinto Talks, which were like mini dev diaries, giving us early kind of information about what was coming, systems, things like that. I've covered all of those on the channel, so do subscribe, do hit like if you enjoy this video. But this is going to be me talking about Europa Universalis 5. I got to play it at the in-studio event for roughly an hour, and then I've had some access as well at home over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. I will say straight away, this game is fantastic. I'd probably name this video is it the GOAT grand strategy game or something? I will say, guys, straight away, if you were worried about this game, don't be. It's so good to play. There are some issues, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later on. But the actual gameplay itself, I will say, if you've been following other strategy games that came out recently, and you didn't like the kind of revolution, I suppose, of that game into something that didn't feel like it was the same game, you don't need to worry about that with Europa Universalis 5. This feels like an evolution of EU4, mixed with some Victoria 2, mixed with some March of the Eagles, mixed with some Crusader Kings. They've taken these systems, these ideas from other games, and integrate them together into what I would say has the chance to be the best grand strategy game that's ever been released. Not even the best Paradox game, the best ever grand strategy game. I know that's a lot to say, and you're probably thinking, Malf, you're talking crazy. But I will say, guys, when you get to see this game running, it is so cool. There's so much in here. There's so much content. That's been some feedback on recent Paradox games that they've launched, kind of bare bones. This has so much going on. Yes, there's going to be some things that aren't there, but there's a lot in here. There's so much stuff. There's things in here that I would have thought would have been DLC that are already there. That, when this game does come out, whenever that's going to be, no official announcement yet on the actual launch date. But whenever this game does come out, I think it'll be very happy people with how much there is to do in this. And we've seen some of that in the Tinto Talks, but actually playing it is a different matter. And I will say there's so much going on in this game. Now, for the rest of the video, I am just going to do a classic Malforian, just rambling about stuff. And then, as I said, those other videos, I'll go into a bit more information about certain things. So overall, guys, how does it actually play? I will say, if you never heard of Europa Universalis 5 or Project Caesar, and somebody just dropped it in front of you and said, play this game, you would be able to do it. Even without knowing all the changes around population, the economy, how all these systems work together, how organizations work, all these things, you can sit there and with no knowledge of the game, pick it up and it feels like EU4, but if it was made now. I know that's probably a weird way to kind of talk about it, but I was a little bit worried when I got to go play it, oh, is it going to be so different? Even though I followed the dev diaries, am I going to be able to actually play it in the limited time I've got? But as soon as I sat there and as soon as the game was running, it was like autopilot. I knew how to play it. There's obviously some things I didn't know how to play. I will say there's some automation I'll talk about later, which really helps with that. But straight away, I will say, if you're worried about this being a weird version of Europa Universalis, is it going to go down a path you don't like? I think for most of you, you're going to be very happy with it. It plays like Europa Universalis if it was 5 times better than Europa Universalis 4. So that is like my initial bit there. I will say there are some things around that some of you, I don't know, I'm not going to say will dislike, but as the time frame of the game does start earlier in 1337, I will say the start of the game plays a lot slower. And I don't mean like the actual time takes slower. I mean the actual like gameplay is slower. It's much less of a map painter at the start of the game. Now, that isn't the case for everybody. As you can see in the footage in the background, I played as Scotland in this. I think it's almost like a very good beginner island kind of idea that you had in Europa Universalis and in Crusader Kings 2. You know, play an island, you can kind of learn the game, you don't get interfered with too much. I will say Scotland was very much like that, so I played a lot of Scotland because you can get a feel of all the mechanics. England is sidetracked with the 100 Years' War, which obviously they weren't in EU4, so you have a little bit more freedom there. You can get involved with that if you want to, ally with France, and then get drawn into it. And that is what I did, and I will say, it does play slower. The changes around Casus Belli, we didn't know about this, but actually playing the game and seeing the actual effect of that is a different thing. Now, it does play slower in that regards. Like, you can't just map paint at the start. You have no CBs. You can't just make a CB with the spy network. You can do, but you don't get like your classic EU4 Casus Belli. You can like humiliate people. You can get like claim throne CBs. You can get CBs through your parliament, which works differently as well. But the kind of like, just create CB spam that you can do at the beginning of EU4 and all the way through that game really isn't there at the beginning. So it does play slower in that regard. Now, there's a bunch of things to keep you busy. As I said, everything in the game is integrated. So like your population, your economy, trading, your armies, disease, which we'll talk about. There's a lot to keep you kind of engaged in the game. Like, I was never sat there thinking like, wow, I'm bored. I've got to wait like 5 years in game to do something. There was always something for me to do. But if you're coming into the game thinking, I'm just going to paint the map and just have a great time, it's very hard to do that, especially where I was playing. I will say, I know some other content creators are going to release videos about some nations where you can play a little bit more in that style. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but with some nations, especially, just general Catholic nations, especially inside the HRE, you're not going to be able to just blob out really quick and just build yourself up and then just go on with your usual EU4 kind of gameplay. Especially those first 100 years are a lot slower, and some of the reason for that is the Black Death. The Black Death comes in, absolutely wrecks you early game. Like, it actually kills off like half your population. So again, for Scotland, I had all my buildings filled up. I was expanding my lumber. I was doing paper making. I was doing textile stuff. I was trying to build up my wool trade. I was just trying to make as much money as I could. I was kind of trying to play it like tall as Scotland in a funny way, just seeing how well I could do the trading side of things and the economy side of things. And I had it in a pretty good place. I just finished a bunch of warfare with England because France called me into the 100 Years' War, and we just finished a war, and then the Black Death started, and it rampages across the map and probably kills like a quarter to half the people in the game. And it absolutely decimates your realm, but in a fun way. Like, I think some people might not like it. It does cause a lot of issues for you, but I think it's a really cool way to have an early disaster, I suppose, where it kind of shakes things up immediately. That is one of the things, especially if you play, like, for me, Crusader Kings, I play that a lot on the channel. The early game doesn't really have anything, or even the mid game for the most part, doesn't really have anything that really shakes the map up. It's everything at the end of that game. You get the Mongols, you get the Black Death, and that kind of shakes things up. But you've got to get right to the end of the game almost to do that. With the earliest start date here, it's like bang, straight away. All this stuff is happening. So you might be thinking, well, if I can't paint the map, Malf, like, what am I going to be doing? You're going to be dealing with all these things going on. And as I said, some of the realms do get CBs from other things, especially if you're playing as like the Ottomans or something. You're going to be painting the map to all your heart's content. But for like general Catholic realms, you're going to be playing that a little bit slower, and then the game progresses, the ages progress, and then you get your professional armies, you get access to more CBs, and then that's when you start going ham. I think it plays out a lot more historical. Historically in 1453, did Scotland just go crazy and take over all of Europe? No, it didn't. I know this is a video game. That's something I always say in all my videos. This is a video game. I'm not recreating a historical text where I'm playing. I want to play out my story. And I think that is what you're going to be able to do here but it is that little bit slower. So I did want to talk about that, because that is probably the one major change where some people might not be fully on board with this, where it does play slower. Not in a bad way, I don't think, but do keep that in mind as you're seeing footage and as you kind of find out more about the game. That is something to keep an eye on if you are worried about that a little bit. With all that being said, though, next I'm going to talk about everything is integrated. That's what I'm going to call it. We've seen this in the Tinto talks, but everything in this game is integrated. You've got population, you've got the economy, armies, these other things I've already mentioned. Like, everything just works together so nice. Versus EU4, which if you've been on the channel for any amount of time, I used to really love playing that game. But then in recent years, I've fallen off the wagon, shall we say, and not played EU4. Because as you all know, well, one, the UI is not user-friendly. Even if you've used it before, trying to come back to it, it's very hard to get back into that game. The UI, we'll talk about that later, is great in this one. Don't worry about it. The way in EU4, and this was a problem with CK2 as well, where they kept building these systems on top of each other. There wasn't very much like interdependency. It was, you know, a new DLC's out, let's put a new system in, and then let's forget about that, the next DLC's out. We saw that philosophy kind of change with Crusader Kings 3. A lot of that game, the systems are kind of intertwined, or at least available to everybody in the base game for the most part. From what I've seen with EU5, like, everything is integrated just like at a gameplay level. So you have that population, you have the economy. As I said, when the Black Death comes in, it just destroys your realm. Not like destroys, but you know what I mean. It just causes havoc for you. You've got all these events going on. Your population is, you know, running out of the cities or running to the cities. All these decisions that you have to make. But that affects your economy. And then maybe the Pope shuts down all trade, so you can't trade. So it's even worse then. Or maybe you shut down your own country and you can't do any trade. You know, all these different ways it can play out, and then that affects your population, and then your population affects your levies. You don't have as many levies, and then war's harder. Or if you somehow escaped relatively unscathed, maybe you've got the biggest levy army, and you can go to war, and everyone else is recovering. So all these different ways the systems work together. And if you're listening to me talk about that, and you're thinking, I don't know, that's a lot going on, guys, well, don't worry about it. Pretty much everything in this game can be automated. I won't talk about it much here. I'll probably cover that in my video in a couple of days, but the automation of things is fantastic in this game, especially if you're coming to it new. You can automate everything, like literally everything almost can be automated. If you just want to sit there and just do trading, you could automate everything else. If you want to sit there and you just want to do warfare and you don't care about trading, you can automate the trading side of it, and it will just make you loads of money if it's set up correctly, or if you make the right decisions as well, and then that can fund your map painting. So there is a lot of different kind of systems, but if it sounds scary in this and other videos, a lot of it can be automated, and the AI seems pretty good at the automation side of things. So that's kind of like my initial talk about like the actual game if you sit down and play it. Now, the next two things I want to talk about are systems in the game that I think just elevate this game even more than I presumed it would from the Tinto Talks dev diaries. The first thing is advances. This is fantastic. This increases the replayability of this game, especially if you're playing as the same nation. And I know some of you that have got like 1,000 hours or more in this game are probably like, well, I always play as England, it's great. What are you talking about, Malf, with replayability? It's Europa Universalis, you can just replay it forever. But the advances system, and I saw some negativity about this when it was first announced in a Tinto talk. So when you move to a new age, there are like 3 areas you can focus on, and they unlock specific advances for your realm, and they focus on either like the admin side, the I'm gonna say like the money making, like the economy side, but also a little bit mixed up with other things for that one, and then the martial side, which is, you know, your warfare, your units, the buffs you're gonna get for units. And for each campaign, when you hit a new age, you have to select one of those, and it locks out the other 2. So already you've got that replayability. As I said for my Scotland campaign that you're seeing in the background, I went very down the economy side. I didn't pick up any of the martial stuff. And then 2 ages in, England kept attacking me, even though I was allied with France. It didn't go well for them, just so you know. But then I switched to martial things in the 3rd age and started picking up some things more along those lines. So that already gives you that replayability. Now, on top of that is the institution side of the game. So when you get an institution, it also unlocks like a whole new tree in the advances. Think of if you played like Hoi 4, how the trees work in there with like your advances. I don't know what they're called in Hoi 4, but where you work down those trees of technology, basically. It's kind of similar here, but the institutions actually unlock a full tree. So once you get like the banking institution in your realm, a whole tree around banking unlocks, and you can go down that tree. Or if you get the new world, you get this whole new set of technologies, set of advances, as they're called. When you unlock professional armies, again, you get a bunch of technology around proper armies, buffing them, allowing you to drill troops, all these different ways. I think there's some CBs locked behind that as well, if I remember correctly. So already you've got like your age choices, and then you have your institutions. Now, obviously, you will unlock the same institutions all the time whenever you're playing, pretty much. So that bit's a little bit different. But again, when I was playing as Scotland, I went down like all the economy ones all the time. So I went down the banking, institution, advances unlocks. I went down the economy, like age bit that I chose as well, which gave me certain things. And that made me really focus on that area of the game. But again, if I started again and I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to go to war with England. I'm going to bring France in. We're just going to beat up England for the whole bunch of the early game. You could do that. You could pick the martial things, and then you could try rush to try get professional army institution as quick as you can, and then you'll have that advantage, and you can really focus on that. So I think the replayability, especially replaying the same nation over and over and over again, is going to be even better than EU4. Just the way you can specialize things. You've got all the laws, you've got the societal values where you can focus between one thing and another, which is kind of like ideas in EU4, I suppose. But it plays out a lot better here, I think, where like natural things that you do especially push you towards one or the other. So, you know, it can push you towards quality armies, or if you make decisions, it can push you towards quantity armies instead. So, like a lot of things in EU4, we're like, click a button, get something. In EU5, it's way more like what you do as your nation affects how your nation kind of grows. That is one thing I will say as well about it, is that like, I like games where what you do makes you something. So like the outcome of your decisions actually kind of shape your realm. And you could kind of do that in EU4, but there was like the meta ways to do things. And, you know, you could just choose whatever you wanted, really. Whereas in EU5, it is a lot more like, I want to try become that trading nation. Okay, I've got to make decisions. I've got to empower the burghers maybe to get some more power for them. That will help me with trading advantage, things like that. And then I want to take all these advances and things that push me that way. But then I've got to like drag the country that way as well. You know, you can't just decide, oh, I'm a capital economy. No, you've got to drag your realm that direction. Say like, no, we're going this way, guys. We're not going towards the other way. And you've got to try pull it that way with you. So I really like that. Again, I guess some of you might not like that, but I think it plays out way better, especially with the replayability of even the same nations is going to be so different. The other thing I quickly wanted to talk about is the proximity control changes. Again, this has been covered in previous Tinto Talk dev diaries. Do take a look on the channel. I have covered them all, so I won't go over exactly how this works now. So I guess for a quick rundown, like proximity and control in the very simplest way is like how much, I guess, control do you have over your nation. And it's way more interesting in this version than EU4. You know, you've got to build roads to expand your control around your realm. Playing as Scotland, I'm obviously mostly down in like Edinburgh, Dunfermline, and over the mountains in the northwest. Well, they don't care about me. They're in my realm, but I have zero control over them. I have zero proximity. So I can build buildings there, but they just go like, whatever, like, you don't control us really. Yeah, okay, we're part of Scotland, but I'm not going to do what you tell me pretty much. You know, they don't pay you tax. They don't give you levies because you don't have that control over them. And really trying to build that up is a whole other side of the game that was kind of in EU4, but it plays out so much better here. You've got to think about, you know, building roads certain places, building up your maritime presence along the coastline, up rivers, things like that, where then you get that control over them. And that's where you can really start seeing your country kind of explode in productivity. And again, as I was saying earlier, it kind of fits with the earlier start, you know, the more feudal beginning of the game. That is what would happen. And then historically, things became more centralized for the most part with most nations. And then that is when they really started to, you know, snowball their effects and things like that. And that is how it plays in EU5. You know, at the start, you don't have much control. You don't have much proximity to your realm. It's very hard for you to get things out of people that they should, in theory, give you. And then as you build up your buildings, your ability to control them, that unlocks the potential of your realm. I really like this, especially if you do those wars, if you do those no CB wars, things like that. You know, they don't really care about you. As Scotland, if I took Northumbria, yes, they're part of my realm, but then they're also like, well, your capital's miles away. We've got all these hills in the way. You know, all these Northumbrians don't see me as their ruler, really, although they are in my realm. So it's very hard to control them, very hard to get the reward out of it, I guess, for taking that land. So you have to build up those different features, those different systems to really unlock that benefit. Or you can, similar to EU4, release them as a vassal, and then obviously, because their capital is within their little like vassal land, they will have a lot higher control. You have less control over them, like actual, you know, click a button to do something control, but you actually probably get more rewards out of it because, you know, they're sending you their tribute and things like that. So there's so many ways you can play it. And as I said, I think the proximity control change is really interesting. It will make you play the game that little bit differently. Maybe you'll go for more of like a coastal sprawl because you can then use your ships to expand your control along the coast. Whereas if you're going in, especially over mountains, it's going to be very difficult for you, especially how it's set up now anyway. But yeah, I wanted to mention that because that is a change. And I think it makes the game that much more interesting to play. It isn't just, you know, get a CB, take some land. Yes, you've got to core it, but then once you've cored it, well, happy times. Why would you never do that? In this game, it is a lot more like, okay, I've taken that land. Maybe I'll make it a vassal, which I know did happen in EU4, but it is a little bit different here. You get more benefit, I think, from it in this version of the game. But anyway, that is everything around that like initial bit that I wanted to talk about. Again, sorry if I'm like rushing through some of this stuff because there is a limit on how long this video can be. So I'm trying to cover as much as I can. There's just so much in this game to talk about. The last thing I'm going to talk about really is things that I'm unsure about. The things that I don't know if players are going to like. The first thing I'm going to say is professional armies are ludicrously good, which they should be. They're professional armies, but they will pretty much just stack wipe any levies. So if you're unlucky, like if you don't get professional armies spawning near you, and it takes you a long time to get that tech and get like proper professional armies, if you come up against a professional army, you will just lose. Like you've pretty much got zero chance against them. You could have way more troops than them, but if they're levies, like historically, I suppose, they just get wiped out like pretty much immediately. They just get stack wiped by a professional army. So I kind of like this. Like historically, it makes sense, I guess. And it makes sense like, yeah, they're like untrained levies. A professional army would just ruffle stomp them. But I think some of you, if you're in a campaign where it works against you, you're going to have a very unfun time. Now, I like that. Again, I like unplanned campaigns on this channel. If you've been here for any amount of time, you know that. So I don't mind this. I think it kind of works thematically in the game very well. But I think some of you might not be too fond of this because, again, in one of my versions of playing as Scotland, I was allied with France. We were going to war with England. Professional armies spawned in Paris. So they were able to get hold of it very quickly. And then they just wrecked England because England didn't have it. And they just, you know, stomped over England. I got a bunch of land out of it, even though I only had levies. I kind of just stuck around in the background, you know, kind of cheerleading France, really. And they won a bunch of battles, sieged down a lot of stuff, and then they were able to get the advantage of that. So again, this is a change because the game starts earlier. You have, you know, more of a feudal levy system, and then it progresses into professional armies. And we have wondered how that will play. I think it plays really fun, but it isn't fun if you don't have professional armies and the other person does. Again, I think that's good gameplay. But I will say some of you probably not going to enjoy it if you're on the wrong side of that. If you're on the right side of that, you're having a ball. You're having a great time because you can just stomp over any non-professional army realms. Like, it's just so easy to do it. So, yeah, that is one thing, I guess, to keep an eye on, see what changes around that. Maybe they'll balance it in some way, but it does kind of make sense. You know, professional trained armies would just destroy levies. There's obviously some historical times when that didn't happen. So maybe there will be some kind of balancing around that. That is one thing to keep an eye on. The other thing I wanted to kind of say in this part of like things to keep an eye on, I've already mentioned it actually, is the no CBs. I think that will be something that some of you are kind of not fully on board on. I didn't mind it because I play these games not as map painters. I know some of you will probably laugh about that and leave a comment down below. You play Europa Universalis 4 and you don't play it for painting maps? Not really, no. I've never done like a world domination in EU4 or anything. It's not really how I enjoy playing it. But if you do play the game for map painting, I think that will be something that will take you time to adjust to. Talked about it already earlier in the video, so I won't talk about it too much again here. But that is something to keep in mind. If you're playing this game just solely for map painting, you might have to play countries that you generally wouldn't play, or you can play and do no CB wars, but obviously you have a lot of negative impacts of that, so you can't just spam them out. Well, you can and see if you can survive, I guess play it hard mode, but that is something to keep in mind. I would say out of all the gameplay I've done, as I kind of try wrap this video up in the time frame allowed, the things to keep in mind as you see more of this game is the professional armies versus levies, and how the game plays very differently at the beginning if you don't have CBs, which a lot of nations don't have easy access to. I don't think personally it makes it bad, and it definitely doesn't make it a bad game, but it is something that I think a few of you won't be fully on board for, at least until you play it, and depending on what kind of mindset you come to the game with. This is a lot more of an integrated game. As I've been saying all the way through this, it's a lot more your realm. Everything works together. Everything has outcomes that affects everything else for the most part. It's a lot harder, especially early game, until you get to professional armies, to just paint the map and just be like, doesn't matter, I'm just going to paint the map. Because then your levies die, that reduces your population, they then can't work in the economy, which means you have less money to make your economy better, so then your population doesn't grow as well, and then somebody else is just going to declare war on you, start taking your land, and you're going to be having a bad time. Actually, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is performance. I know a lot of the questions down below will be regarding that, so let's just kind of cut that off at the pass, and I'll talk about it quickly here. But do ask the questions, I will answer them in that follow-up video. I'd say performance-wise, the game is in a pretty good place to say how kind of like early access it still is, and how much content is already, you know, crammed into it already. You've got the population system, and you've got the economy side of things that are kind of built onto EU4 in a way. You know, it isn't just EU4 in a reskin, as we've talked about already. There's all these extra systems kind of integrated into it. I'd say the performance pretty good. You do need to have a relatively beefy PC to run it at the moment, but again, it is early access. They did say they've not really done any optimization passes still, because they're still, you know, adding as much content as they can, refining the content, and then they'll do the performance passes later. If you believe that or not is totally up to you. I would say, you know, you do need to have a pretty good PC, as I said, to run it. I've got 32 gig of RAM, 3070, and a high-end Ryzen processor. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but it ran really well, to be honest. You know, like the day-to-day tick over of the clock was pretty fast. So yeah, overall I'd say performance in a pretty good place, but it's so early. Like, who knows? I don't want to say it'll run flawlessly when it comes out, because I have no idea, but I did want to talk about it quickly because I know a lot of you will ask about it. But really, guys, that's my first impression. Sorry it's been like a little bit scatterbrained. That's how all my videos are, where I'm talking unscripted for the most part. But I wanted to put this video out because, again, I did have early access. I did get to play it. But overall, my last parting thoughts on the game, it's fantastic. Like, it's everything I wanted it to be. Is it everything you want it to be? I don't know, but it isn't a full like redo of the entire game in a way where it's unrecognizable from Europa Universalis 4. You don't need to worry about that. It is a step up from EU4. There are some mechanics that I think some of you might not be fully on board for, but I think overall it's just such an improvement over EU4. There's so much content in there at launch. You're not going to be picking up and thinking, oh, where's all this content? Like, it's all in there, or for the most part it is. You know, you can play as the Aztecs, they have special content. You can play as China, they have special content. You can play as the Mali Empire, they've got special content. There's just so much to keep you interested. As I said earlier on, I'm going to have some follow-up videos to this, talking about some other things. I've not even covered how the game looks in-game. It looks fantastic. It looks way better than it does in the Tinto talks. People were worried about the character models and things. Don't be. It looks great in-game. Like how things look on the map, the 3D map looks amazing. I'm sure they probably showed that off, or you've seen it in the video. The industry that you build is on the map, so if you build mines, you see a mine in that location. If you have sheep farms, you see a little sheep farm there, and things like that. So, you know, you can see things without having to dig into menus to find out what is happening there. So overall, like, fantastic game, guys. I'm going to have to wrap this up, but do leave the questions down below. With anything you want to ask, I will answer them in a follow-up video in a couple of days, answering all those questions. Like I said, I'm free to talk about anything that I've played or seen, so I can answer them as best as I can. There is some bits I didn't play, but I'll call that out if I didn't play it. Maybe I'll guide you to a different content creator that I know did play in that area. But anyway, we'll leave it there for today. This is my first impressions on EU5. It's going to be great. We're going to have to wait for it, though, for a little bit longer by the sounds of it. So do like the video if you've made it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. As I've said, I've covered this game from, like, non-official announcement, all the dev diaries they've done. I think I've got, like, 70 videos on it. And then, obviously, now it's been announced, I'm still going to be covering all the dev diaries, all the news, everything that's going to be coming out over the next days, weeks, months, all these things as we build up to the official launch day, whenever that is, whenever we get that announcement. You know, there's so much we're going to be talking about in the future, so do subscribe, we'll be talking about it. But I do also cover Crusader Kings 3 in a very similar manner, so if you like that game, also subscribe. But we'll leave it there for today. I'll see you all in the next video.